Spent $340,000 on my daughter's wedding. The venue, the catering, the flowers that she said had to be flown in from British Columbia, the open bar that her fiancé insisted on, the hotel block for 60 guests, the honeymoon suite at the Fairmont in Quebec City, all of it, every cent from the savings I had built over 40 years working in commercial real estate in Toronto. And on the morning of the wedding, standing in the lobby of the venue in my rented tuxedo, my daughter walked up to me, looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, I need you to sit in the back. My father-in-law is walking me down the aisle." I had not been replaced. I had been erased. 2 days later, I had 97 missed calls from her. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and if you believe a father's love should never be used as a transaction, hit that like button and subscribe to Pride of Dad. My name is Walter Ashby. I am 63 years old. I spent most of my career as a commercial property developer in the Greater Toronto area, and I retired 4 years ago with enough to live comfortably, to travel, and to help my family when they needed it. I say help. What I mean is that for the last decade, I have been the financial engine behind almost every major event in my daughter's life. Her university tuition at Western, the down payment on her first condo in Mississauga, the car she needed when her transmission failed, the renovations on the house she bought with her husband, a man named Preston, whom she met at a conference in Ottawa and married, apparently, somewhere between treating me like an ATM and treating me like furniture. My wife, Diane, passed away 6 years ago. Breast cancer. She was 58. She never got to see our daughter Megan get engaged. She never got to argue with her about flowers or dresses, or whether they needed a second photographer. I used to think that was a mercy. Now I am not so sure. Diane had a way of seeing through people. She would have seen through Preston in about 4 minutes. I had met Preston twice before the engagement. Once at Christmas dinner at Megan's condo, where he spent most of the meal on his phone, checking what he called market movements, and once at a birthday lunch for Megan where he corrected me about our RSP contribution limits as though I were a confused pensioner who had never managed a financial portfolio. He was 34 years old and worked in tech sales. He had an opinion about everything and experience in almost nothing, but Megan loved him. Or at least she loved the version of him she had decided to see. I had learned enough in 63 years to know those two things are not the same. When she called to tell me they were engaged, her voice had a brightness to it that I had not heard since she was a teenager who had just been accepted to university. I told her I was happy for her. I meant it mostly. I told her I would do whatever I could to help with the wedding. She said she was so glad to hear that, Dad. She said she wanted it to be perfect. She said Preston's parents were coming in from Vancouver, and it was important to her that everything was beautiful. I said of course. I said of course it would be. What followed was 8 months of spreadsheets, deposits, and phone calls that almost always ended with a number and my credit card. The venue was a heritage property in Niagara-on-the-Lake. The catering was a firm that specialized in what Megan called elevated Canadian cuisine, which, as far as I could tell, meant that the portions were small and the price per head was not. I paid for the rehearsal dinner. I paid for the rehearsal dinner. I paid for the bridesmaids' gifts. I transferred money to Megan's joint account with Preston 4 separate times when the budget grew beyond what they had originally planned. Each time, she sent me a voice message saying how grateful she was. Each time, Preston did not reach out at all. The week before the wedding, I drove down to Niagara-on-the-Lake and checked into the inn they had reserved a block of rooms at, also paid for by me. I had not been given a role in the ceremony yet. I had asked about it twice, and both times Megan had said they were still figuring out the details. I assumed I would walk her down the aisle. Her mother was gone. I was her only living parent. I did not think it needed to be discussed. The morning of the wedding, I got up early. I showered and put on the tuxedo I had rented. I looked at the mirror in the small inn bathroom and thought about Diane. I thought about how she would have been up at 6 ironing something she did not need to iron, talking to Megan on the phone, crying while trying to pretend she was not. I thought about how I had cried alone at the kitchen table the night Megan got engaged, not from sadness but from the specific grief of not having someone to share the good news with. I fixed my tie. I went downstairs. Megan was in the bridal suite with her bridesmaids. She came out to the lobby when I texted her that I was there. She looked beautiful. The dress was ivory with long sleeves and lace at the collar, and she looked exactly like a younger version of her mother, which is the sort of thing that takes a moment to recover from. I hugged her. She smells like the perfume Diane used to wear, the same one I had given her for her last birthday. I held on a little longer than I meant to. She pulled back. She touched my lapel and smoothed it, the way her mother used to. And then she said it. "Dad, I need you to sit in the back. My father-in-law is walking me down the aisle." I stood there. The lobby had those high ceilings that heritage buildings have, and the sound of the bridal party somewhere down the hall echoed faintly. I kept my face still. I have always been good at keeping my face still. It was a skill I developed in boardrooms where showing surprise was a form of weakness. "What did you say?" I asked. My voice was steady. She told me again. She said it carefully, like she had been rehearsing it. She said Preston's father, a man named Gerald Whitmore, whom I had met exactly once, and found about as warm as a January morning in Sudbury, had specifically asked if he could walk her down the aisle as a gesture of welcoming her into the family. She said it would mean the world to him. She said Preston really wanted it. She said she hoped I understood. She said she hoped I understood. I looked at her. I looked at the dress I had paid for, and the flowers in her hand that I had paid for, and the venue behind her that I had paid for, and the venue behind her that I had paid for. I thought about the 4 wire transfers, the down payment on the condo, the car, Western University. 40 years of work condensed into the number $340,000, which was approximately what I had contributed to the life and wedding of the woman standing in front of me, asking me to sit in the back. "Of course," I said. I smiled. I kissed her on the cheek and told her she was beautiful. She looked relieved. Guilty, but relieved. She went back down the hall. I stood in the lobby for another moment, alone, and then I walked outside into the cool May morning. I did not go back to my room. I walked around the grounds of the venue for a while, looking at the vineyard that ran along the property line, the rows of vines still bare in early spring. Then I sat on a bench near the parking lot and called the only person I trusted to think clearly when I could not. His name was Clifford O'Say. We had been friends since university in London, Ontario, 40 years ago. He was a retired family law attorney. He picked up on the second ring. "Walk me through it," he said. After I told him what had happened, I walked him through it. The money, the transfers, the 8 months, the lobby, the dress, the father-in-law from Vancouver. There was a brief silence. "And you signed nothing?" he asked. "No formal agreements," I said. "Good," he said. "Go to the wedding. Sit in the back. Watch everything. Do not say a word today. But Walter, the moment this week is over, you call me. We are going to do a full accounting." I went back inside. I sat in the back row. I watched Gerald Whitmore, a tall man with silver hair and a well-fitted suit he had not paid for this occasion, walk my daughter down the aisle. I watched him give her hand to Preston. I watched Preston not look at me once. I watched Megan glance at me briefly as she passed my row and give me a small, apologetic smile. The kind of smile you give a waiter after you've sent back the food. I stayed for the ceremony. I stayed for the dinner. I sat at a table at the far end of the room with 3 of Preston's colleagues from work, and a cousin of Megan's from her mother's side, who spent most of the evening complaining about the drive from Kingston. I ate the elevated Canadian cuisine. I had a glass of Pinot Noir from the Niagara region that I myself had recommended to the caterer. I gave the toast I had prepared, because they had at least kept that. I watched Megan laugh at the head table with her new in-laws, animated and bright, and I smiled when she looked over. I drove back to Toronto the next morning. The 3-hour drive down the Kiwi W gave me time to think. I was not angry, not yet. The anger was still below the surface, banked like a fire that had not been given enough oxygen. What I felt was clarity, the specific, cold clarity of a man who has finally seen something that had always been there. I thought about the conversations over the last year. How Megan always phoned when she needed something and always seemed slightly distracted when she called just to talk. How Preston had never once called me directly, not to say hello, not to say thank you for the down payment on the condo they were living in, not to say anything at all. How at the rehearsal dinner he had introduced me to his colleagues as Megan's dad, with the same inflection you would use to introduce someone's accountant. I thought about what Kifford had said. A full accounting. That was exactly right. It was time to account for things. On Monday morning I made 4 phone calls. The first was to Clifford. The second was to my financial advisor, a woman named Rosa Tamboli, who had managed my portfolio for 12 years. The third was to my estate attorney. The fourth was to the property management company that handled the rental income from 2 commercial units I owned in Etobicoke, units that had been quietly generating income for years in an account I had never mentioned to Megan or Preston. I also logged into the joint account I had set up with Megan 4 years earlier for the purpose of helping her with large expenses. It had been my way of being available to her without the awkwardness of asking her what she needed the money for. There was currently $4,200 in it. I made a note. Over the following week, I did something I had been putting off for 3 years. I updated my will. I reduced Megan's immediate inheritance substantially. I redirected a significant portion of my estate into a discretionary trust, the terms of which Clifford helped me draft, with conditions attached to distributions. I also removed Preston's name from any secondary beneficiary designations. He had been added to one of my insurance policies 2 years ago when Megan had asked me to, in case anything happened to her. I removed it. Then I called Rosa and asked her to move the bulk of my liquid assets out of the accounts Megan had visibility into through the family financial access I had given her when Diane died. At the time, I thought it was important for her to be able to see what I had in case something happened to me and she needed to act quickly. I trusted her then, I still loved her. But trust and love, I was learning, were 2 different instruments. None of this was visible to Megan. She and Preston were in Quebec City, at the Fairmont, in the honeymoon suite I had paid for. She was sending me photos of the St. Lawrence River from the terrace. She captioned one of them, "Wishing you were here." I did not respond. I also did not respond to the text Preston sent me on Wednesday of that week. It was the first text he had ever sent me directly. It read, "Hope the drive back was good. Megan says you seemed a bit off at the wedding. Probably just emotional. Understandable. Thanks for everything you did to make the day special." I read it 3 times. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter. I made a pot of coffee. I stood at the window looking out at the backyard where Diane had put in a small vegetable garden 20 years ago. The space now just grass. And I thought about what a man is owed after 40 years of building something. Then I picked the phone back up and did not reply. They came home from Quebec City on a Thursday. Megan called me the following Saturday morning. She sounded refreshed, happy, the relaxed warmth of someone who has just returned from a good vacation. She asked how I was. I said fine. She asked if I wanted to come for dinner that week. I said I was busy. She asked if everything was okay. I said I was fine, just tired, still catching up after the trip to Niagara. She said Preston wanted to talk to me about something. She said they had been thinking about buying a larger property, a detached house in Oakville, and that the market was moving fast and they wanted to move quickly. She said Preston had found something with a good lot size and a finished basement that they could rent out for income. She said they were a little short on the down payment. She said they were a little short. I let the sentence sit on the line between us for a moment. How short? I asked. 80,000, she said. She said it quickly, like pulling off a bandage. She said they had talked to the bank, and with 80 more they could lock in without stretching too thin on the mortgage. I told her I would think about it. She said she knew it was a lot to ask. She said Preston was really excited about this property, and it would make such a difference to their long-term financial security. I said I would think about it. I called Clifford that afternoon. He laughed, the specific short laugh of a man who has seen this kind of situation many times in a professional capacity. How long after the wedding? He asked. 11 days, I said. There was another short laugh. I did not think about it for very long. I had already done my thinking. That week, I had a very productive conversation with Rosa about the best structure for a private family trust that I had been considering for several months, one that would benefit my late wife's niece who was putting herself through nursing school in Hamilton, and a scholarship fund in Diane's name at the community center where she used to volunteer. We also discussed the second commercial unit in Etobicoke, which I decided to sell. The proceeds went into the trust. I called Megan the following Tuesday. I told her I was not going to be able to help with the Oakville property. I told her calmly. I told her I had done some thinking and decided that going forward I was going to be more conservative with how I used my capital. I said I was getting older and needed to make sure I was not overextended. I told her I wished them luck with the house. There was a pause. Then Megan said, "Dad, we really need this. We've been counting on you. You've always helped before." I said I knew. I said I was sorry. I said I was sorry. I said I couldn't. Another pause. "Did Preston do something?" she asked. I almost said yes. Instead, I said, "Why would you ask that?" She said she just wanted to make sure things were okay between us. She said she knew the wedding was a bit complicated, and she was sorry if she had hurt my feelings about the aisle. She said she hoped I wasn't holding that against them. She hoped I wasn't holding it against them. I told her I was not holding anything against anyone. I told her I was simply being responsible with my finances. I said I had to go. I had a call with my advisor. I hung up. The next 36 hours were quiet. Then they were not. First, it was a text from Megan saying she wanted to talk. Then another saying she was confused and hurt. Then Preston texted me directly for the second time in his life. This one considerably less polite than the first. He wrote that he found my behavior passive-aggressive and financially unpredictable, and that Megan was upset and he felt I owed them both a conversation. He used the word owed. Then Megan called. Then called again. Then her number appeared on my screen 97 times over the following 2 days. I know because I counted, not because I was keeping score, but because at a certain point the pattern itself becomes a kind of information. 97 calls is not desperation. It is pressure. It is someone who is accustomed to applying force until a door opens. I let it ring. On the third day, I drove to a coffee shop in the annex that I liked, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window with my phone on the table in front of me. Then I called Megan back. She picked up before the first ring had finished. "Dad," she said, "thank God. I have been so worried." I said hello. I asked how she was. She said she was not good, that she was confused, that she didn't understand what was happening, that this wasn't like me. I listened. Then she said Preston had found another property in Oakville, and the offer deadline was the next evening, and they were so close to making it work, but they just needed the bridge, just the 80, just this one thing. She said after this they wouldn't ask again. She said they just needed to get into the house, and then they could build equity and eventually pay me back. She said, "Pay me back," using the specific softness in her voice she had used since she was 12 years old when she wanted something. I looked out at the street. A streetcar moved past. A man was walking a retriever that had stopped to investigate a patch of sidewalk with the focused attention that dogs give to things humans cannot perceive. "Megan," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." She said, "Of course." She sounded hopeful. "At the wedding," I said, "when did you decide that Gerald was going to walk you down the aisle? When did that decision get made?" A pause. "Dad," she said, "this isn't the time for that." I said it was exactly the time. She said she didn't know why I was bringing that up now. She said it had nothing to do with the house. She said Gerald had asked, and it was important to Preston, and she didn't think I would mind because I was always so understanding. She said she should have talked to me first. She knew that now. And she was sorry, but could we please focus on the house because the deadline was tomorrow night? I said, "I paid $340,000 for your wedding." She was quiet. I said it the way you might state a line item in a ledger, not as an accusation, not with emotion, just as a fact that needed to be in the room. "I paid for the venue," I said, "the catering, the flowers, the hotel block, the rehearsal dinner, the honeymoon suite, the bridesmaid gifts, the dress, the 4 transfers over the last 8 months when the budget went over." I said all of it clearly because I had been doing the accounting for 3 weeks and the number was exact. "Dad," she started. "I know you love Preston," I said. "I understand that. I am not asking you to choose. But I need you to understand something. I sat in the back row of the wedding I paid for and watched another man's father walk you down the aisle. And not 2 weeks later, I am being asked for $80,000. I need you to sit with that for a moment." She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said very quietly, "I didn't think you'd care that much about the aisle." I said, "Of course I cared. I'm your father. You're my only child. Your mother is gone. What did you think I was going to feel?" Another silence. She started to cry, not the strategic tears of someone trying to shift the dynamic. Real crying. The effortful, ungraceful kind. I recognized it because I had heard it at Diane's funeral and at no other time since. I let her. I did not fill the silence. I have learned over 63 years that silence is not cruelty. Sometimes it is the only thing honest enough to hold the weight of a moment. After a while she said, "I'm sorry, Dad, I'm really sorry." I said I knew. She said she had let Preston influence how she managed things with me. She said it had happened gradually, and she had not noticed how far it had gone, until she was in the lobby telling me to sit in the back and watching my face go still in the way it did when I was hurt, but did not want to show it. She said she had known in that moment. She had known, and she had done it anyway because she did not know how to undo it in real time with 60 guests waiting. I listened. She said she didn't know what she was asking me to fix anymore. She said maybe the Oakville house didn't matter. She said she was sorry about the aisle. She said it more than once. I believed her, not entirely, but enough. I told her I was not going to help with the Oakville property. I told her that was final and not something I was going to revisit. I told her it had nothing to do with punishment, and that was true. It had to do with a decision I had made about what kind of support I was willing to give going forward and under what conditions. I told her Preston had never once thanked me. Not for the condo down payment, not for the car, not for the wedding, not a call, not a note, not a word. She said she knew. I told her that the version of me who signs checks without being treated like a person was no longer available. I told her I loved her. I told her she was the most important thing left in my life, and I was not going anywhere, but I said going forward I needed to be spoken to like a father, not managed like a resource. She said she understood. She did not ask about the Oakville property again. What she did not know, what she would learn gradually over the following months, was the shape of what I had restructured. She would notice that the joint account was closed. She would notice, when she checked the beneficiary documentation her lawyer requested during a later estate planning conversation, that things had changed. She would eventually find out about the trust in Diane's name and the scholarship fund. None of it would be delivered as a pronouncement. It would simply be the landscape she discovered as she navigated her life. Preston found out about the Oakville offer falling through and blamed market conditions. He texted me one more time, a long message with a tone I can only describe as a man who believes he is being wronged but cannot quite identify by whom. I read it fully and did not respond. The house in Oakville was purchased by someone else. Megan and Preston stayed in the Mississauga condo, the one I had helped them buy 4 years earlier, the one that was now worth considerably more than what they paid for it thanks to the market, and in some small part, thanks to me. I hope they appreciate that, eventually. I think Megan will. I had lunch with Clifford in early September at a place on Bloor Street we had been going to for 15 years. We ordered the same things we always ordered. He asked me how I was doing. I told him I was sleeping better than I had in years. He raised his glass and said, "To clarity." I raised mine and said that sounded exactly right. I still talk to Megan. She calls more often now, and the calls are different. She asks about me, not just what I can do for her. A few months ago, she brought up the wedding on her own. She said she wished she had handled it differently. She said she was working on some things with Preston, things she wasn't ready to talk about yet, but that she wanted me to know she was paying attention. I told her I was glad. I did not ask what the things were. That is her process and her time. I planted a vegetable garden in the backyard in May. Nothing fancy. Tomatoes, a few herbs, one row of carrots that mostly disappeared before I could harvest them. Diane would have found that very funny. Some Saturday afternoons I sit out there with a coffee and let the quiet of it settle around me. Retirement, when you strip away the noise of people who want things from you, turns out to have a texture to it that is almost peaceful. I learned something in the last year that I wish I had understood sooner. Generosity is not a guarantee. You can give everything and still be treated as though you have given nothing. The account does not carry over automatically. People have to choose to honor it, and not everyone does, even people who love you, especially sometimes people who love you. But you get to decide what comes next. That part belongs to you. Nobody walks you away from that.